Hello, everybody. It's Mrs. Grover again. We came to you last week and we had our first Summer with the Saints video. And if you missed it, we talked about Saint Damien. Well, this week we are now in the month of May, which is a month that we devote to Mary, our Blessed Mother. I'm not going to talk about Mary today, but I do want to show you. I've got some different statues from our house of Mary from the different rooms. And then we've got a book here with Mary on the front cover of it. It's a book about saints. It has a saint for each of the 365 days in the year. And Mary's on the cover, of course, because she is our greatest saint. So I say all that because I want you to keep paying attention to these videos that we're posting. Next week, we will have Mrs. Jenilyn doing a special video on Mary, the greatest of the saints, our Blessed Mother. So next week we'll talk about Mary, but this week we are going to talk about Mary's husband, and I think you all know who that is, Saint Joseph. Saint Joseph is so special that he gets a couple of different feast days throughout the year, and one of them already happened this week on May 1st, and that's the feast of Saint Joseph the Worker. So let's dive right into it. I wrote a little thing about Saint Joseph based on a few different books. But before I start reading to you about Saint Joseph, I'm going to show you a couple of pictures, not really photographs, right? They're more drawings of Saint Joseph. Here's one where he's shown with some angels, and right here is Jesus, his foster. Saint Joseph was Jesus's foster father here on earth. And so there's the first one. And then this is a nice one. This is from, I don't know if you guys have ever seen these Book of Saints series. I think they come from St. Joseph's kids' books, and they have a bunch of them, all different volumes in the series. So here's a picture, again, of Joseph pictured with Jesus. So very good. Those are two pictures for you. And with that, we'll dive right in. So St. Joseph, whom we often refer to as Jesus's foster father, was the husband of Mary, and together they raised our Lord and Savior, Jesus. I read that Saint Joseph often is known as the silent saint. And why do you think that might be? Why would he be known as the silent saint? Well, the reason is, if you read the entire New Testament in the Bible, and just to review a bit, there's two parts to the Bible, right? The Old Testament and then the New Testament. And the New Testament gets into everything that happens once Jesus comes along and after Jesus. The Old Testament is all things that happened before Jesus was here on earth. So in the New Testament of the Bible, if you read the entire thing, you will not see one instance where St. Joseph is directly quoted, right? That's kind of surprising, isn't it? We hear a bit about St. Joseph in the Bible in the accounts of Jesus's birth, which we call these the infancy narratives, the infancy narratives. When you think about the word infant, you think baby, right? So, and the infancy narratives are in the Gospels of Matthew and Luke. If we remember, there are 4 Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. But the infancy narratives are just in the books of Matthew and Luke. So we also hear a bit about Joseph in the accounts of Jesus's early childhood. So the Bible doesn't give us a ton of information about Saint Joseph, but the information that the Bible does give us speaks volumes about the man of virtue that Saint Joseph was and how he lived the virtues of faith, hope, and love throughout his life. And kids, as you get older, you'll learn that those virtues, we call those the theological virtues: faith, hope, and love. Sometimes we call them faith, hope, and charity. But when we say theological, what we mean is that those virtues were given to us by God, Theo, God. Okay, so Saint Joseph lived those virtues of faith, hope, and love throughout his entire life. Saint Joseph is so important that the Catholic Church, like I was saying before, dedicates 2 different feast days to him. The first is on March 19th, and we actually call that a solemnity, which is like an even fancier feast day. And then the second St. Joseph's feast day was May 1st, a few days ago, and that's the feast of St. Joseph, the worker. So what do we mean by that? As Jesus' earthly dad, and as a man who worked hard as a carpenter, Joseph's life is an example to all husbands and dads and to men and women of every single vocation out there. What is a vocation? We've talked about this a little bit before, right? A vocation is a calling from God. Does he call you on the telephone? No. God's speaking to us, maybe when we are praying, maybe when we're dreaming. God's talking to us and communicating to us that he's got a plan for us, right? So some men have a vocation or a calling to be priests. Father Mike and Father Ken are good examples of this vocation to the priesthood. And some men and women are called to the married life. I'm married, right? Joseph was called to marry Mary. He loved Mary and wanted to marry her very much. She said yes, but when Joseph learned that Mary was going to have a baby and it was not his, he was upset. Then he had a dream, and in the dream, an angel told Joseph that it was okay to marry Mary. The angel explained how Jesus was God's own baby, and that Joseph was being given the very important task of taking care of both Mary and Jesus. So that's a very important job, right? So Joseph accepted this calling from God. And we refer to Joseph, Mary, and Jesus, typically we say Jesus, Mary, and Joseph, as the Holy Family. Jesus, Mary, and Joseph, the Holy Family. So Joseph lived his vocation and took care of both Mary and Jesus. Okay, all that said, Saint Joseph is a great role model for all of us in so many ways. Right now, I'm just going to talk about two of those ways. So the first way I would say he is a great role model for all of us is that Saint Joseph always listened to God without complaining or questioning. Okay, so number one, Saint Joseph always listened to God without complaining or questioning. And the second way, number two, in which he is a great role model to all of us, is that Saint Joseph knew what it meant to be a humble servant of God. A humble servant of God. He knew what that meant. Saint Joseph managed to pull off both of these things, even though he was the only imperfect member of the Holy Family. So we've heard the word perfect, but do we know what the word imperfect means? Imperfect. I am imperfect. Imperfect. Well, why don't you're watching at home, hopefully, raise your hand if you're watching this and you are perfect. Notice that I did not raise my hand. I am not perfect, okay? So my hand is definitely not up in the air, and hopefully yours isn't either, because none of us is perfect, not one of us. Joseph, like all of us, was not perfect, and the word that means not perfect is imperfect. So what does this mean? It means that he messed up sometimes, right? He sinned. We know that Jesus didn't sin. He did not sin. He was both human and divine. He was perfect. Mary also did not sin. We know that Mary was immaculate, which means she was clean. She was pure. God kept Mary, our Blessed Mother, sinless. She never sinned throughout her entire life. She was pure. Isn't that amazing? Think about that, to never sin throughout your entire life. Wow. So we celebrate Mary's purity every year, and you'd have to fast forward all the way to December. We celebrate Mary every year on December 8th. We celebrate the feast of the Immaculate Conception. When we talk about immaculate, we're talking about Mary. So let's get back to Joseph though, okay? Getting back to him and how he worked so hard. Remember, May 1st, we're talking about May 1st. It's the feast of Saint Joseph the Worker. We know that Saint Joseph taught Jesus about carpentry and hard work. He was a carpenter, an artisan. He made things with his hands, right? We know that he worked hard to provide for his wife, Mary, and his earthly son, Jesus. Saint Joseph, the worker, is a wonderful role model for all of you kids, especially during this time, when all of you are at home and you can't be at your regular school, like hopefully you'd like to be there, right? Maybe not all of you want to be at your regular school and you're enjoying being at home, but anyway, you're at home and you're hopefully working very hard on your schoolwork. And maybe that's a little bit more challenging. I think it's been more challenging for my kids without your teachers there guiding you every step of the way. Maybe you're talking to them on a Zoom call or on a Google Meet or whatever venue, but it's a little harder when you're on your own doing that work. So St. Joseph can be a really good role model for us when we're doing our work, when we're doing all that schoolwork. It's so important for all of us to understand the importance of working hard and persevering. Persevering, that's a big word. What does it mean though? Its meaning is pretty simple. To persevere means to stick with a job and continue to work hard, even when the work is tough, even when the work is even boring. Question for you, is all of your schoolwork always interesting and fun? Probably not. Some of it might be interesting and fun, but some of it may be boring. I've had to do some boring work before, and some of it might be hard to understand. So if we follow St. Joseph, the worker's example, we persevere, we stick to it, we keep going, even when the work is hard or boring, or even when we get discouraged, and even when we might want to give up because it's so hard. So St. Joseph is remembered and celebrated on May 1st, and he's celebrated today in our Catholic faith as a patron saint of families, a patron saint of manual labor. What is manual labor, you might be asking as you're watching this? Well, think of manual labor as the kind of work that isn't done at a desk, but rather the kind of work where you sweat and you get tired and you maybe get dirty and you use your hands and you might have to lift things. It can be very challenging to do manual labor and it can tire you out. So we said St. Joseph is the patron saint of families and the patron saint of manual labor. Manual labor is physical work that requires strength, and you guessed it, it requires perseverance. St. Joseph the worker's life reminds us that humble work is necessary and that all work has dignity, which is such an important thing for all of us to remember as we're working. So that's St. Joseph the worker in a nutshell. I hope you guys learned something about him today. As I record this, today is, it is May 3rd. So we are into the month of May. A week from today is, guess what day? It is Mother's Day. So I hope all of you are going to do something really kind for Mom. Maybe make her a card or make her something special. Maybe help her around the house a little bit more, but do something special for Mom this week. And I hope all of you have a great week. And the next time we have a video, it'll be Mrs. Genelin talking about the Blessed Mother. And May is a great time to honor Mary and to take out your rosary, maybe do a May crowning at home. And that's it from me. We will see you soon. Have a great week.